Ahsoka episode 3 has just finished airing on Disney Plus. This episode was directed by Steph Green, the same director of episode 2. And so this continues, of course, where we left off in episodes 1 and 2. Now, because of the fact that these reviews are going to be coming out right after the episode airs, when I'm doing these reviews, I think from now on what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, and thumbs down at the beginning as a non-spoiler, and then I'll go into the spoiler stuff right after. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, I'm assuming most of you did see it, but if you haven't seen it, it's still a thumbs up show. The first two episodes obviously more impactful. This one builds on the next or on the previous. When it comes to reviewing TV shows, it's like that sometimes. You have to review each episode if you choose to, or do the season as a whole, because the season will be the overarching story. This is just a small chapter of it. This episode was pretty good. Pretty good. And it did continue the story and added a new layer to the plot. And we're going to go into that here in just a moment. So that's it. The spoilery stuff is coming up right now. So in the first two episodes, if you remember, they established everything. And one of the big plot points was Sabine wanting to learn Jedi arts. In this episode, the first section of the episode is her training with the droid and with Ahsoka on the Jedi arts, and her sort of learning little by little, but not doing well. She's struggling. She's not catching on to it. There's even a line later in the episode, a conversation between Sabine and Ahsoka about the Force and how she doesn't feel it. And Ahsoka does say there is a measure of talent, but training is what really hones your skills. Very similar to what Luke said at the end of Mandalorian Season 2. You can have the talent, and the talent will help you, but if you don't train and if you're not disciplined enough to become, to really reach your peak and really understand this, you're not going to go very far. So this is a situation where the story here is that Sabine is very impatient, and Ahsoka's trying to get her to calm down a little bit. So the other plot is with Hera. She goes to the New Republic, and she's trying to get some armaments because they think they know where Grand Admiral Thrawn is, but the Republic, the Senate and the Republic are saying, we think he's dead. We don't want to give you this. And they actually show for the first time Hera's child, who is also the son of Kanan. Kanan, of course, being the Jedi Master of Ezra and the Jedi from Star Wars Rebels, played by Freddie Prinze Jr. So again, if you haven't seen Rebels, it's not necessary, but it would really help you with the context of the story. It really would help you understand what's going on. Same thing with the space whales, which we're going to discuss here in just a moment. So it's very dumb to me that the New Republic that was built after a war is so, I guess, ignorant to the fact that Hera is a general. She fought in the previous war. She knows what she's talking about, and they still don't want to give backup. So Ahsoka's heading out to where Morgan is. She's heading out there alone. She doesn't have an army with her. Or what would be necessary would be a fleet. She doesn't have any of that. This episode was called Time to Fly, and the real story behind it was literally that. There's a space battle in this episode. And like we talked about before, this episode is a 35 or so minute episode. It's not very long, but they did with their time relatively well. It wasn't a complaint for me. But there was a space battle here. We saw some space action between Ahsoka's ship and the other ships that were around where Morgan was at, and Morgan's ship. Now, I want to clarify, because they did go into it in this episode. Morgan is not in a traditional ship. The headquarters of the villains, at least for right now, is not there. On the contrary, it's a giant sort of hyperspace drive, with the idea being that this is the hyperspace drive they're going to do to get to the other neighboring galaxy where Grand Admiral Thrawn is. So this area they're going to is actually further than the unknown region. So, at least in theory. So that makes me, of course, wonder, why did the Emperor hide on Exegol in the unknown regions when he could have gone even further away and then eventually come through? Now, maybe this show will explain it. And obviously they explain that Exegol is an ancient Sith homeworld, so that does make sense. I'm not criticizing the sequel trilogy on that, even though obviously I've criticized it a lot throughout the years. That's not to me a major flaw of it. You know, the location of Exegol, that's not really a huge deal to me. But nevertheless, it is further out. So it almost feels like Thrawn is in an even harder place to find than the Emperor. Like, that's kind of how it feels. So, anyways, we have the space battle. We have a shot where Ahsoka goes out onto, like, outside the ship with her two lightsabers to actually try and disable a couple of the ships. That was over the top. But again, I'm kind of used to that from watching stuff like Clone Wars and Rebels. Jedi do seem to be powered up a lot more in those shows, especially the old 2005, 2004 Clone Wars series, the original one. That one had Jedi doing all kinds of stuff. But still, it wasn't a big deal. I foresee with the Force, not really, but I foresee people complaining about this. They're going to say Ahsoka's too powerful and this and that, and it's possible. I don't think it's that big of a deal, though. I could easily see Yoda or Mace Windu doing something like this. And obviously, they're of higher rank than Ahsoka. What I'm saying is it wasn't so crazy to where I was like going to say, okay, that doesn't make sense in this world. The entire issue is, what like the entire cliffhanger of the episode is, as they're approaching the big hyperspace drive, they get shot down and they wind up on the planet that's near the hyperspace drive. So it's like the planet that they're orbiting around. And before they get there, they see the space whales. Now, the space whales are these literally whales in space. They're giant whales in space that can traverse light speed. And we actually see the space whales once again in Rebels. So if you're somebody who's seen Rebels, you recognize the space whales. If you're not, that's where they're from. And Ezra was on one in the final season, if I remember correctly. But basically, the space whales, we find out that based on some conversation, that the hyperdrive, the whole idea behind the space whales and what their involvement is here is that, presumably, and I think I understood this right, the hyperdrive they're building to leave the galaxy to go into the neighboring galaxy, the space whales used that pathway to move through space. So they're going to kind of, I guess, either harness the power of the space whales or follow the space whales or find a way to control them in order to get to Thrawn. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do it, but the space whales have an involvement. They helped Ahsoka solve the puzzle, the riddle that Morgan and the rest of the Dark Jedi are trying to find Thrawn and communicate with him. After episode 3, I can safely tell you that, yes, I am still invested in this show. And I am still interested to see where they go. It's still the most interesting Star Wars show so far from a lore perspective. And I would say that although the show's not over yet, my interest level in this is probably close to what it was for The Mandalorian's first couple of seasons. So I think when all is said and done, if they continue down this path and the quality of the show stays like this, not everything has to be perfect, but if it's at least good, better than like your Obi-Wans and shows like that, if it stays this good, then to me, I could see it being at that Mandalorian level. And me personally, like I've said before, I like Jedi lore more than anything. So I would be more into that than I would just Mandalorian stuff. But that stuff, they've done a great job in Mandalorian of getting that over with me. So those are my thoughts on Ahsoka episode 3. I will talk to y'all soon. And of course, next week, we will do episode 4. And that's how it'll be. Next week's episode will be directed by Peter Ramsey, who did a movie called Rise of the Guardians with DreamWorks. And he's got experience. So let's see what he can do. All these episodes, of course, were written by Dave Filoni. Take care, y'all. See you soon.